This is the question that I know you always have to answer on Instagram, and I would like to give you an opportunity to explain it, because I see lots of people that are upset with the process. So obviously, when these animals are caught, they're euthanized. And can you explain why that needs to be done? And I know there's a lot of animal lovers that listen to this and people that see you on Instagram, and they actually get very upset. But I understand, and I know you understand why they get upset. But there's actually a really important reason to make sure that the population is being eradicated.
Yes. So people love to ask the question, what happens to the tegus once they're captured? Unfortunately, for almost all of these animals, they are euthanized. And it's not a happy thing. I don't think there's a single person in invasive species management who actually enjoys euthanizing an animal. And so it's definitely not, the brightest part of your day, but it is absolutely necessary. So these tegus, they can be tamed down. They are absolutely can be taken into captivity, fed, and they will calm down. I wouldn't say you could get them to the level where you can hold them and cuddle them like one that had been raised in captivity, but you can, build a relationship with them. They learn where the food comes from, and they don't see you as a threat anymore. So it's not because they can't be tamed down, because they can be. Unfortunately, the issue is there are two big ones, which is one, we still have a lot we can learn about these animals. And so having them euthanized, you're able to see how they impact the environment over several years. So for example, in the context of my diet study, I can look at their diets in 2016, I can look at their diets in 2017, I can look at their diets 2018, and I can see changes in their diet. So have they overexploited one animal that they've been eating or one resource, and now they've moved on to another one? Have they encouraged on new habitat and been able to predate upon a threatened species? I'll be able to see those changes, and those changes could help with informed management as far as spread. Like, just because I'm catching them maybe I'm catching them in an area where there are no crocodilian eggs, but I catch an animal that has a stomach full of crocodilian eggs, and then I know it traveled. So it traveled someplace where it had access to these eggs, even though there's none in the foreseeable area. And now I need to know where they went, how did they get there, and so I can start exploring beyond, maybe my study area, to see where they've moved to, and what creatures they're exploiting, what resources they're exploiting. So there's still a lot we can learn. So that's one big one, is we want to be able to learn as much as we can from these animals. And the second big one is that, unfortunately, there's not enough homes for all of them. What's going to end up happening a lot of the times, and there are private trappers who trap the wild tegus and will put them back into the pet trade. There's nothing regulating that right now. There are no legal binds preventing tegus from being pulled out of the wild and rehomed or resold. But it brings it back full circle to how they got there in the first place, and it's from accidental escapes or accidental releases or purposeful releases. People think that, they can't take care of the animal anymore, the animal's sick, they're moving, all sorts of reasons, and they think that, all these animals live in the Everglades already, so if I just put one more there, he'll be happy and he'll survive, instead of going through the process of rehoming or properly, taking care of this animal for its entire life. So it's like an open system, as far as you catch an animal from the wild, give it to a homeowner, and especially these animals that are not entirely the friendliest. If you sell it to someone who's unsuspecting and they get a very defensive animal that they don't know how to handle, there's a chance they're either going to give it back to whoever they got it from, and who knows if it's going to get resold again, or it's going to end up back in the Everglades potentially. So we wanted to kind of keep these animals from circulating. Another good example would be for feral cats. You can't find a home for all of them, and shipping them across the United States, shipping them back to where they came from, can have a huge impact on whatever area they end up in. So as we ship them back to where they came from, South America, which these animals came out of the pet trade, so they have been exposed to all sorts of diseases. Not only that, but they've been living in Florida. We actually are having issues with parasites. There was just an article written about how Burmese parasites that likely came in on Burmese pythons are actually contributing to the death of some of our native rattlesnakes here. So any parasites that they pick up from Florida, if we send them back to South America, there's a potential that our Florida parasites could start killing animals in South America. And it's the same for wherever they get sent. If they are infected with any disease or any type of parasite, or plants are a good one. They eat plants. So if you take a non-native plant and they go and poop somewhere else, they're spreading non-native plants, which is doing nothing but exacerbating the problem. So we do the best that we can with what we can. If they are able to be transferred to other research projects, we do transfer them to other research projects when that opportunity arises. And other than that, they unfortunately are euthanized, and we do necropsies. So we look at all their internal organs, their health, what they're eating, if they are reproductively active, all sorts of things. And so we try to learn as much as we can from these animals as possible.
Yeah, no, I think that is a great answer. And I know it's hard to type all of that out on Instagram. So, and it makes sense. And it wouldn't make any sense for you guys to put them back into the pet trade. And obviously that's clear to you guys. You guys are animal lovers. It's not that you enjoy euthanizing them, like you said. It's just the pet trade is actually responsible for this devastating invasive species, and part of the responsibility of that is actually having to euthanize these animals. It just sucks that that's what we have to do, but those are all really good points for why we can't just keep them, because that won't actually solve the problem.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate too, because it's not every owner, and I think that's a really important distinction. When I respond to people online, a lot of the times, that is long to type out. It is long to explain. And I'm more than happy to talk to people private messages to explain in more detail. But it's not every pet owner. It's not every breeder. It's not every importer. Like there's a clear understanding that just because you're an importer of a certain species does not mean that you're an irresponsible person, does not mean that you're a bad person. And I think that's a big misinterpretation when I answer that question. Because I'm honestly a huge pet owner. I have several pet snakes. I have a couple pet geckos. So I absolutely partake in the pet trade, but I do my best to make sure that my animals are contained and stay contained. So it's like I'm supporting the pet trade, and I'm also supporting invasive species management, which is a result of pet trade. And so it's hard to walk both lines, because you understand where people are coming from, but you also understand the management aspect. But when it comes down to it, if you do end up with having a moment, and it doesn't have to be on purpose, you accidentally have an animal escape, this is something that can happen. You accidentally have one or two escapes, and then suddenly you have a non-native population in the Florida Everglades. And this non-native population, this invasive population of tegus, is potentially going to cause issues for the pet trade. And for pet owners, they had a bill that was pushed to make tegus and green iguanas educational only. You had to have a special permit to own them, and you were not going to be able to own them as personal pets anymore. It was going to be strictly educational animals, and that's in part due to them being such a huge problem in the Everglades. So that bill did not get passed, so there's still no regulation on tegus. But that's the type of bill that has come out of this issue. And I personally feel regulation would help, but I don't